Okay, so I have a really cool story to tell you today. And I don't want to forget all the details because it's been at least a month since all this went down. And I don't want to forget any of it. So I'm going to tell the story. And hopefully it comes across the way it's meant to about how incredible everything that happened was. First, I'm going to open scripture. I'm going to say in Genesis 22, there was a story about how Abraham was called by God to sacrifice his only son. And God told him, go onto the mountain, get things ready, and provide a burnt offering for me. And I want your burnt offering to be your son. Which seems really barbaric and ridiculous. But there was a reason for it. It was a test. It wasn't that God was actually asking Abraham. He was asking him to sacrifice his son, which is kind of a little bit foreshadowing, as many of you well know, about how God sacrificed Jesus for us. But point being that, long story short, God called Abraham to sacrifice his son, and Abraham obeyed, because that's the kind of man that he was. He was a godly man, and he believed everything about what God said, and he said, okay, well, you told me to do it, I'm going to do it. I don't want to, obviously, because it's his son. He loves his son. He doesn't want to sacrifice his son. But it was a test. And God called him for a test. And so he went up, he obeyed, he did everything he was supposed to do, he got things ready. He went up onto the mountain, got to a point where he was about to make the sacrifice. And God said, wait, Abraham, wait, through one of his angels. And he stopped him, and Abraham looked over, and there was a ram caught up in a bush up on the mountain. And so that ram became the sacrifice instead of Isaac, his son. God provided at the last minute before he had to make the ultimate sacrifice. How that applies to our story and what happened to us is that my husband and I, back in October, we were renting a beautiful home. It was a dream home, really. It had everything that we needed. It had enough space for everyone. It was a really cool house, a really neat house that we were renting. It was a little bit older. The family had just rented it out. It was the first time anybody else beside any family member had lived in this home. So we intended to take care of it well. Well, about mid-October of last year, we experienced a house fire in this home we were renting. We began to smell smoke around 9 o'clock at night. My husband and I were settling down for the night, and I'm like, oh, I smell smoke. What is that? So we started to investigate, and we looked around the whole house, looked around, couldn't find anything, didn't know where it was coming from. And then my husband discovered a fire in the attic of the house inside one of the bathrooms. Now, it was purely an electrical fire. It was nothing that we could do to prevent it or cause it. But this was something that could have been a whole lot worse than it was. We called fire department. Fire department came out. They put out the fire really quickly, but the entire house smelled of smoke. The entire house was filled with smoke at that point. Because it was in the attic, it was headed outside of the house. Smoke was everywhere. The entire house was covered in smoke, so the whole house was smoke damaged. If any of you know anything about smoke damage, it's quite the toxic thing to deal with. It's very, very toxic. It's very caustic. It's very chemical-y, for lack of a better term. But it's not good to breathe in. It's not good to come into contact with after it's come into contact with your belongings, etc., etc. fast forward 6 months. We're 6 months into the ordeal. We have been going back and forth, with insurance companies and restoration people and advocates and this and that, trying to get our stuff clean, trying to get our belongings clean, our contents cleaned in the house. Couldn't get it done. Our stuff had been sitting there exactly as it was, down to the food that was in the fridge, down to the rotten apples that were on the countertop, down to the dirty dishes that were in the sink. I mean, it was like frozen in time for 6 months, since October 19th. Since that night, it was frozen in time, literally. And couldn't do anything, didn't want to touch anything, didn't want to go in there, didn't want to breathe. All of the toxicity that was still in the house because it hadn't been aired out, no windows had been open, nothing. So somewhere around the beginning of last month, we received a letter in the mail, and that letter was from a legal entity, we'll call it that. It was from a legal entity representing the housing company that we were renting from, and they said, you have until this date to clean out your entire house full of belongings. And that date was within 5 days of the date that we received this letter. Talk about panic in your heart. I mean, oh my goodness gracious. We weren't panicking per se, because we know that God's going to provide a way, because there's no way that things like this happen without God being a part of it. So we're not worried. We're not freaking out. We're not, letting on that there's a problem and anything like that. We didn't freak out, because we knew God was going to provide. We didn't know how. We didn't know how we were going to do it, but we knew that it was going to happen. And so, fast forward to the next day, I ended up calling into work and saying, okay, I can't come in today. We just got this letter. I don't know how many days that I'm going to be able to work this week. But, this is something that I have to deal with. It's unfortunate. I'm sorry to inconvenience you, whatever. And so I called in for work and missed time and had to figure out a way to coordinate all this. Meanwhile, my husband's at work and I'm having to figure out what kind of resources can we pull together. He had some ideas, so we kind of pulled our ideas together and began trying to contact people on Monday. I mean, Monday was basically like the first day of coordination and / try to touch the house and try to start cleaning things out. And so that was kind of my task for the day, as I tried to coordinate things. I tried to write some emails, contact the church, contact a couple of different people just to see, just to put my feelers out and see who would be willing to help. I contacted the church, I contacted my company, I contacted local fire departments, just to see, anybody who would be willing to help us out, and posted things on Facebook, social media, all the things, just to try, because you don't know until you ask. And that's been a really big theme for me, is that you don't have because you don't ask. So we got into the whole process of trying to contact people, trying to get things worked out. Fast forward to the next day, we didn't have any progress yet. Still sort of in contact with folks. I think I went into work for a couple of hours that day just to kind of bring my mind off of it. Went back to the house, started trying to clean things out some more. Basically just filled up our trash bins that were there with nasty food, rotten food that was still in the fridge for 6 months. Plasticware, because we're not supposed to use plastic after having it been exposed to smoke. Everybody that we talked to said you're not supposed to use plastic. after it's been smoke damaged, and after it's been exposed to that, it like soaks into the plastics and, you know, all of our small appliances, you name it. I mean, we threw away a 40-yard roll-off dumpster full, and that is the equivalent of about 4 tons of our belongings. We had to throw away our couches. We had to throw away a lot of books, a lot of memories of our children, their things, you know, a lot of belongings, our couches, our beds, our bedding, everything. I mean, it was a devastating loss that we had. Day 3, we get a response from, day 1, like that day, on that Monday, I got a response from our church home, Hope Fellowship out of Frisco. They have several campuses in the area, but one of their main campuses is in Frisco. They contacted us back, and they offered to figure out a way to help us, and I'm absolutely ecstatic. I named a couple things, and I said, look, we need to get ABC. We could either do this, or this, and what they sponsored for us was the roll-off. So we were able to obtain a roll-off dumpster, which was a very huge expense that we wouldn't have been able to pay for if it hadn't have been for them. So God provided us a roll-off that we needed through our church. We needed heavy labor. We needed help. I mean, my husband and I did the majority of the packing and disposal of everything, you know, collecting things up to dispose of. But we needed help as far as like the heavy lifting. And so day 3, I got a call from a local fire department, because I contacted the local fire department as a Hail Mary. Like, I don't know who else I can call, who has strong backs and willing hearts that's going to be able to help us, you know, lift things. I mean, at the time I was 5 months pregnant. Now I'm 6 months pregnant. I had no business being in and out of the house as it was, breathing things in with a baby on board. So it was hard for me to want to do it, because I didn't want to hurt my child, my unborn child. And at the other flip side of the coin, there's not a heck of a lot of lifting that I can do. And so I had contacted the local fire department just to see. Again, you don't have because you don't ask, right? That's like the general theme for me right now. You don't have because you don't ask. And so I asked the question. I said, look, is there anybody who would be willing to help a family in need who had this devastating thing happen? You guys were the ones who actually put the fire out. So, you know, do you remember this story? Do you remember this house, this call? You know, could you possibly send some willing hearts and some strong backs to help us with getting things thrown out, you know, getting things moved into a moving truck or what have you? So someone contacted me back. They actually sent out 6 strong back, willing, kind-hearted men showed up to that house that morning and helped us throw everything away and helped us load everything up into a truck and unload on the other end of things into a storage unit, so that we can await our process here with trying to get all of our things made right and trying to get made whole. So God provided the help. God provided the way to do it. Within, I don't know how quickly this happened. It was probably maybe 3 days. 3 days. We had a need. The need was filled in 3 days. By day 4, day 5, we were just in coordination mode and do it mode. Thursday, I don't even know if we didn't even have a moving truck on Thursday. So Thursday night, we had booked a moving truck, thanks to family. Because if we didn't have the moving truck, I don't think we would have been able to do it. We wouldn't have been able to do anything without all the parts and pieces that we had put together. So on a Sunday, we get a letter from a legal entity, again, that told us we had to be out the house within 5 days. by day 3, we had all the parts and pieces together for the most part, as far as coordination and help and movement and things. By day 4, we had all the parts and pieces together, and my husband and I were packing, obviously, during that time. I took a few days off. I went during the day, did some packing. He and I went there and stayed late at night after work and did some packing and moving and sorting through things. And then we had taken an entire day between the two of us, and we packed up the rest of the house and was able to have everything staged and ready by Thursday night so that we could get everything moved out by Friday. And we were completely out of the house by Friday night at 10 o'clock. Again, tell me God doesn't provide. Tell me God doesn't exist. Tell me God doesn't test you in some of these certain ways and doesn't follow through with what he declares he's going to provide for you and promises you. I'm still absolutely blown away. Like, by the end of that week, I was blown away, and it took me probably this long to really be able to process it, and it still kind of blows my mind about how that came together. Because what seemed impossible at the beginning of the week became possible because God. Because God. There's so much that has happened to us that's because God. Our story, when I tell you our story, it doesn't make sense. And it's absolutely unbelievable. It's because God. The amount of things that have happened to us, it seems like it would be unbelievable. It seems like how do these people keep going through these things and keep coming out with a positive attitude and being able to laugh and being able to enjoy life? It's because of things like this, that just how God comes together with a story and then, asks me to tell the story. And that was confirmed again this morning with the daily scripture reading from YouVersion. But he is so good. And he is so good amidst the tests. And he is so good when you need him to be. He is there. He is working it out. He is working behind the scenes in ways that you can't even imagine. And all that you need to do, yes, you need to be still, but at the same time, you need to be involved. Be still. Don't worry. Rest. He's going to take care of it. But at the same time, you can't be lazy. You cannot be lazy about how you react in the midst of the test. If I had laid down and said, I can't do this, what am I going to do? What am I supposed to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Instead, I took action. Instead, I started asking questions. Instead, I started contacting people and getting things organized and getting things worked out and started taking action within the first day. Because if I hadn't given it to God at the beginning of it all, we wouldn't be where we are right now. It's to a point, and it's at a place where, because of how things went down with that fire in that house, God was protecting us anyway. God knew some things that we didn't about that house, and he knew that we were going to get pregnant. He knew the timing of it all. He was protecting us with that fire. He needed us out of that house. And so because of that, we know that we know that we know that we know it's going to work out. We know it's going to work out. We knew that going into that 5-day challenge. And we know that moving forward with this whole battle that we have moving forward with our stuff in this house. We know that we know that we know it's going to work out. We know it's going to work out for the good. there's zero chance that this is not going to work out. Because God is a big God. He's in control. His promises are good. But you can't be lazy about it. You've got to take action. You've got to work with him. You've got to work together with him. He's not just going to do it for you. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes things work out, and sometimes he'll provide in ways that you know, sometimes he does. It just depends on the situation. But you still have to be an active participant in your own story. If you're not an active participant in your own story, what are you doing? You've got to work alongside with God and not just expect things to be given to you. It's a partnership. It's a relationship when you're working with God. And when you believe in him for the goodness of your story, even though sometimes it can be difficult. Anyway, wanted to hop on and tell you that story. My baby's kicking and reminding me that I actually have to go in and go to work now. So, I love you guys, and I hope that our little snippets of our story is inspiring to you, and I can't wait to tell you more. Thanks for listening. I love you. We'll talk soon. Okay, one more thing before I go. I have a feeling somebody's going to say that, Alyssa, God doesn't exist because you did all those things. You called all these people. You coordinated all this stuff. You did it. God didn't do it. Nuh-uh. I got to tell you, these people were volunteering their time, volunteering their resources, blood, sweat. They literally were there doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. These firemen are a part of an association for our city. My city did not have to forward that email that I sent to the correct person to be able to get things done in a timely manner. Did not have to connect me to the correct person for the Firefighters Association, for my area, for the city that we live in. Those people did not have to volunteer their time. They could have just said, no, we're not going to do this. We don't have time. We can't do it. They didn't have to come to our home at 8:30 in the morning after having been on call all night long and being up all night and move all our stuff for us and sweat during the day and sweat during some of the hottest parts of the afternoon in Texas. They didn't have to do that, and they did it. God brought them together. God brought the church in. The church didn't have to do it either. The church could have said, well, you know, we don't have the resources for this. I'm sorry, we can't help you. The folks in our family, our family is wonderful, salt of the earth, but they still didn't have to help us. None of these people had to bring their resources and their time together for us to get this thing accomplished. No, none of them did. All I did was coordinate it. All I did was contact people. These people volunteered their time, volunteered their resources, volunteered their sweat to pull this thing off. It was all God. All I was a coordinator and a voice. There's no other way to put it. So you can't tell me that I'm the one that did it, because I didn't. It had nothing to do with me. All it had to do was with me contacting people and doing what I did. God did the rest. Because there's zero chance that in 4 days, essentially in 4 days, that anyone would be able to move a house in 4 days. 4. Tell me how that happens. If you can tell me. Tell me any other way that could happen other than by God. Thanks, y'all. I wanted to jump on and say that because I know someone out there is going to come up with that and say, no, you did it. God didn't do it. God is a God of miracles. And what we witnessed during that week at the beginning of April was a miracle. Love you guys.